Good morning, and I want to reintroduce you to the woman who saved my life. Dr. Elisa Port is the chief of breast cancer surgery and the director of the Dubin Breast Center, part of the Tisch Cancer Institute in the Mount Sinai health system. And this is the woman who removed the cancer from my breast that I didn't even know I had because I couldn't feel the lump. And it just demonstrates the importance of mammography May at Mount Sinai. It's time to get your mammogram. Whatever you do, don't put it off. But first, Dr. Port, I want you to explain to the listeners why you decided to become a breast cancer surgeon and how the Dubin Breast Center came to be, because it's just when I walk in there, I feel the warmth, I feel stable, I never feel scared, and I really credit you and the Dubin Breast Center for that.
Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Shelley. My gosh. First of all, it was, of course, an honor for me to be your doctor. I know patients have lots of choices, so it's always incredibly flattering and honoring when people choose us to take care of, choose me to take care of them. I became a breast surgeon because, number one, I love taking care of women. I love working collaboratively with them. And breast cancer is one of the only diseases where, interestingly, women have lots of choices to make. And so you work with them, to figure out what is the best option for them. And I think that's an incredibly fulfilling role. The other thing is that I'm a very optimistic person by nature. And breast cancer has so much room for optimism. There are new treatments being developed all the time. In the 20 years that I've been doing this, the progress has been incredible. And so the fact that I can legitimately convey optimism to my patients and see them for years at a time. You just said, gosh, I love the follow-up appointments where we chit chat about family and friends, and that can only be done in a kind of cancer where the outcome and the outlook are so positive. So those are some of the things that attracted me to the field. I also love working with my hands. As a surgeon, I'm not sure if I was not a surgeon, if I would be any kind of doctor. I might be something like an electrician or a carpenter or something like that. I do a lot of handiwork around the house. I'm like responsible for all the light bulbs being changed and a couple of other things. So I really love working with my hands, and it's really one of the only kind of fields left where people work with both their brain and their hands. So those are some of the, superficial things that attracted me to the field. I obviously am thrilled to talk about the Dubin Breast Center. Eva and Glenn Dubin, who are very, very special people, had this vision and Eva, who is a doctor, is sort of, I call her my partner in everything, in all things breast cancer. She really had this idea of building a center that was really, really much more what I call patient-centered. So, of course, it's music to my ears when you tell me that when you walk in, you feel calm, you feel relaxed. It doesn't resonate as a cancer center. So what we tried to create is a hybrid between a full service cutting edge cancer center and the intimacy of a private doctor's office. So we have every modern technology, cutting edge technology. There is nothing you can't get as a breast cancer patient in the Dubin Breast Center. 20 clinical trials, amazing research, amazing technology, amazing techniques. And yet it has more of a boutique-y feel, like a private doctor's office, where you have these very close relationships with your doctors that I think are really important, especially to cancer patients. The nursing care is also super important as it relates to that. I've had patients tell me, quite frankly, they were sad when chemo was over because they had built these relationships, seeing these people every week, and that was done. And so I do feel like we've created something special and different, and that it's not just another cancer center and not just another place to have your breast cancer care. And Eva contributed heavily to this because she's an internist herself, and she's interested in a lot of the integrative services. So massage and cold capping to preserve hair during chemo. These were all many of her initiatives that we really saw eye to eye on, and together we just kind of build on each other's kind of vision to really, to really activate and really bring into reality, I think, the top tier cancer center. Of course, I'm biased, but in the city, in the country, in the world. And we have had patients come to us from all over the world now, all over the country, which has been incredibly gratifying to see them respond in that way, as you have.
Right. Now, what I always say is that the Dubin Breast Center took the scare out of breast cancer. And that I really attribute to you, because when my husband and I came in, you gave us a book that you wrote, and I want you to tell the audience the name of the book, because your words brought comfort, but reading the book, reading about the facts, it just, you and the book just calmed us down, and we knew that we would be all right. We knew that there were options that were going to work for us. So just tell us the name of the book.
Sure. So the book is called The New Generation Breast Cancer Book: How to Navigate Your Diagnosis and Treatment and Remain Optimistic in the Age of Information Overload. And basically what it was born out of, Shelley, is like, I didn't set out to write a book. I set out to say, there is really something needed here. There's a hole that needs to be filled for patients with breast cancer. And it was really about 10 years ago that I started conceptualizing this, where I was seeing, 10 years ago was when the internet was really exploding, and women were coming into my office as things with breast cancer care were getting better and better and better. I couldn't understand why people were coming into my office with more doom and gloom than ever before. And so I said, I think what's going on here is the internet. The problem with breast cancer is not lack of information. It's actually too much information with no filter. And women with these really excellent prognosis cases were reading stuff that had nothing to do with them. And, women were going to the internet in these chat rooms where there was a lot of desperation and a lot of desperate cases. And, think about it. Women who have great outcomes really don't go back to the internet and say, yeah, I had breast cancer surgery and everything went great and I moved on and I'm back to my life. Nobody does that. So what you see on the internet is what we call a selection bias of bad outcomes and scary cases. And yes, there are those, but they are certainly not the majority. And so when women who are not newly diagnosed go to the internet, they see this collection of, much worse, usually disease and cases than they have. And that leads to this kind of doom and gloom. And so I really said to myself, look, I'm not going to tell people it's not realistic, and it's very paternalistic to say, don't go to the internet, don't Google this, don't Google that. But at least we can give you some framework to kind of insulate people a little bit from the kind of scary stories that are out there. And let them know that, there's nothing on the internet they will find that can give them information about their particular case. It's just too complicated, and there's no one size fits all, and everyone's case is different. And that's really the take-home message.
I'm speaking with my doctor, my breast cancer surgeon, Dr. Elisa Port. She's the chief of breast cancer surgery and the director of the Dubin Breast Center, part of the Tisch Cancer Institute, Mount Sinai Medical System. And we all know Rocktober as Breast Cancer Awareness Month, but Mount Sinai has set aside Mammography May. So Dr. Port, tell us about that.
So mammograms, Shelley, do save lives. I know there's a lot of controversy out there, and about 5 years ago and 10 years ago, there was some studies that were trying to implicate that the data was conflicting, but it's just not true. Women who have mammograms are way less likely to die of breast cancer because the cancer is picked up early when it's infinitely more treatable and curable. And here's something that I'd like to add, which is specific to the research that we've contributed from Mount Sinai. We did a study showing that not only do mammograms save lives, but if you take women who walk into our center, Shelley, and you look at groups that have never had a mammogram, never had a mammogram, but it was more than 2 years prior, and women who had had a mammogram within 2 years. All these women have breast cancer. Okay. So, like yesterday, a woman came into my office. She hadn't had a mammogram in 10 years. God knows why. Okay. When you look at those patients in separate groups, the ones who had had a mammogram within the antecedent 2 years, way less likely to need a mastectomy, way less likely to need all their lymph nodes removed under their arm because of cancer spread, and way less likely to need chemotherapy. And this is across all age groups. So the dirty little secret is, yes, we can cure breast cancer even in women who don't have mammograms, but who wants all that extra treatment and more interventions if you can avoid it? If you offer a woman, cure my breast cancer with chemo, cure without it, of course, and the survival would be the same. Who wouldn't want less treatment? And I think that's super important as well. All of these things that we do have risks. Mastectomy is much bigger surgery. Removing all the lymph nodes under the arm has risks like lymphedema, swelling of the arm. Chemotherapy has downstream side effects before, during and after treatment. And so the minimization of treatment and side effects related to that is a huge benefit, and mammograms do help us achieve that. And that's because if you're finding cancer when it's a pinpoint or a dot before you can feel it, the treatment algorithm and the treatment pathway may be very different.
One of the concerns I guess women have is the exposure to radiation, and you have 3D mammography. So tell us about that.
Sure. So we were the first, of course, toot our own horns a little bit. We were the first in New York to have 3D mammography at the Dubin Breast Center. And it really helps us a lot because it kind of pages through the breast. And while, yes, there is a slightly higher radiation exposure because there's more imaging, the net effect is it reduces a lot of the callbacks related to mammograms, which are, we think we see something, we need to get more views. So overall, the net effect is probably a reduction in radiation because we're not calling people back in for more pictures. And it also reduces a lot of the anxiety and stress related to mammograms when we, quote, think we see something and have to call people back in. That's a very, very common scenario, very stressful. And quite frankly, it's why a lot of women don't do their mammograms because of the worry. So 3D mammograms have definitely taken the wind out of the sails of the mammography kind of antagonists and the people who are against mammography, saying, oh, it leads to too many false positives.
One of the things I love about the Dubin Breast Center as a breast cancer patient who no longer has breast cancer is when I go for my annual mammogram, I get the results in minutes.
Yes.
Not days, not hours, minutes. And there's, it takes the stress away. We only have about a minute left. What have we not imparted to the audience that you would like to add, Dr. Port?
I think that the key is that only about 60% of women, Shelley, in this country who should be getting mammograms do it. And it is one of the life-saving screening tests that confers all the benefits we just discussed. I would tell women we're seeing a lot of women now who missed 2020 because of COVID and missed 2021. So I would say this is an opportunity for awareness to get back in there and get back on track. And I think you've done a huge service to your listeners by conveying, your own experience. So incredible thanks for sharing that. And we can take care of this. And let's demystify it and get your mammograms and take care of this. And knowledge is power, and taking care of breast cancer is easy to cure, and you can approach it with a lot of optimism.
I thank you so much, Dr. Port, the woman who saved my life.